What is up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of the Weekend Roundup. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of the content going up on the channel. Starting in the Premier League today with the game of the weekend, Aston Villa and Newcastle. It is Villa who come away 4-1 winners. The game was close for a while, and then a late avalanche of goals tilted it dramatically in Villa's favor. And it is a massive, massive win for Villa for a couple different reasons. First, the practical side of things. You feel very differently about their Champions League hopes if they don't win this game. The fact they got the 3 points, they prevented Newcastle from running away from everybody else, and they kept the pressure on Chelsea, on Manchester City, on Nottingham Forest, all of those teams that they are battling with. Absolutely massive. Yes, of course they could have still found a way had they not won this game. But at home, direct Champions League rival, team you're competing with for those 5 spots, and the confidence that this gives you moving forward. The midfield was really, really good. There was just a lot to like. They were the better team. Newcastle found a way to get a goal, and you thought maybe they're going to find a way to steal this game or at least get a point out of it. It wasn't dramatically imbalanced, and then all of a sudden the goals just started piling in, and a deserved and a really, really important 3 points for Villa. The other side of this, not only do you have the practical part of this was a really important game in the table, coming off of a valiant and unsuccessful attempt to rally back against PSG in the Champions League, and a game in which your star striker was not in the starting lineup and has made no qualms, has no issues telling people how upset he was about it, to get this kind of performance, to get Ollie Watkins back in the lineup and to score almost from the opening kickoff. He was really, really dangerous, particularly in the first half. He had a really good game. To get that kind of response from him, whatever message Unai Emery was trying to send worked. And they almost came back in the Champions League too. It wasn't like that backfired, and he got the response from Ollie Watkins. So you've got some confidence here. Watkins got on the score sheet. Feel like that's all kind of in the past, and if anything, it's just going to continue to motivate him to make sure he doesn't get dropped again. There's an added chip on his shoulder now. You feel good about where you are. You're right in the thick of this race. Just a really, really important win, an important weekend for Aston Villa to not only just keep pace points-wise, prevent Newcastle from gaining on them, but also to get some confidence back and to really set themselves up for success. This is what it's about moving forward, and obviously you're still battling on 2 fronts here, but you know what the focus is. You are still very much in this Champions League battle. Really important win for Aston Villa. The other 2 things I want to talk about are MLS related. We have another meeting between the Columbus Crew and Inter Miami. These are, to me, undoubtedly the 2 best teams in the league. With all due respect to the Vancouver Whitecaps, who I do believe are one of the best teams in the West, they've got a lot of work to do to get on the level of these 2 teams. These are the standard bearers in MLS right now. Usually when these teams play, it's 3-2, it's 4-3, it's back and forth, it's goals. There's some questionable defending or some bad moments trying to play out of the back. And you didn't really see much of any of that in this game. Miami get a goal. Kremoski does really well to get on the end of the header. Get on the end of a cross, headed in. But it was much more cagey than you would expect. Columbus had the better chances. And particularly, you're looking at Jason Russell-Rowe, the opportunities he had, the positions he got himself into, and the inability to finish. Obviously, this is all in the context of battling again in the playoffs, right? This is all setting the stage. Something horrendous would have to happen for these 2 teams who have started the season really well to not make the playoffs. They're going to be probably the 2 favorites, barring something unexpected. So we're just trying to get more information about what this might look like if they end up meeting each other in the playoffs. And Miami more or less look like the same team from last season. Maybe a little bit less convincing at times, still trying to implement some new pieces, new manager, but you pretty much know what you're getting. The interesting dynamic here with Columbus is that the polished goal scorer, of course, Cucho was way more than that. And Christian Ramirez, to a certain extent, falls into this category too. 2 of your 3 main goal scorers, we'll just put it that way, are gone from last season. And so you have to figure out how to replace that and what that is going to look like. And obviously the trade for Daniel Gazdag, transfer, technically, not a trade. The transfer for Daniel Gazdag is a big part of that solution. And of course he scores a lot of goals. But he is also a 10, not a 9. And so you have your 2 kind of creative forces who also chip in with goals, but are kind of the guys behind the striker. You feel very good about Gazdag and Rossi. Gazdag was made to play in the system. I can't believe I didn't sort of think about that earlier from his regard, that it's absolutely perfect for him. I think he's going to be great. I'm not worried about that. He had a couple opportunities in this game, still trying to get used to everything. The concern is what happens and who gets on the end of these opportunities. Sometimes it'll be Rossi, sometimes it'll be Gazdag. But most of the time, the person it's going to fall to is whoever's playing that lone number 9 position up at the very top of this interesting formation that Columbus used. And if you have a concern or something that is going to separate these 2 teams, it is that. Miami, situationally and in terms of finishing, are much, much better. That's obviously kind of how they make their living. Columbus are going to create more opportunities because they are so good with the ball, so good in possession. They don't have to be as lethal finishing as Miami are. But those moments, when the margins are so slim between these 2 teams, could very well determine what this is going to look like moving forward. Maybe who wins the Supporters' Shield, but probably more, if they play in the playoffs, who's going to advance. It's going to be, will Miami's backline hold up, and it's going to be, will Columbus capitalize on the opportunities they create? Because you know Miami are going to. That is the big question for Columbus this season, is Jason Russell-Rowe up to it? Do they do something in the summer to add at least competition, if not a clear upgrade at that position? Because I talk about this all the time. Not so much in the context of MLS, more in the context of the Premier League. But you can play all of the pretty passages of play that you want, create all these chances, dominate games. It doesn't really matter if you don't put the ball in the back of the net. Dominating possession only goes so far. And if you are just a team that doesn't finish well, that is a problem. Columbus are not that, at least not right now. But this could be the defining difference between these teams. And maybe Jason Russell-Rowe gains more confidence, gets into better form as the season goes on, is able to adapt in those split-second situations better. But that's really what I came away from this game thinking about, is, do Columbus have enough in attack? Because even replacing Cucho Hernandez with Daniel Gazdag, as good of a player as Gazdag is, he's not Cucho Hernandez. From a pure talent standpoint, Cucho's the better player, and from a what he offers on the field standpoint. They're obviously different players as well. Somebody's got to get on the end of all of these chances. Columbus's season and their ceiling is going to be determined by whether that happens or not. And then finally, I did want to also talk a couple minutes about Steve Cherundolo announcing that he is going to be leaving LAFC at the end of the season. He's going to head back to Germany. It seems very clear that that's where he has always wanted to be. That's where his family has wanted to be. It was a sacrifice to take this LAFC job. And so now they're going to go back to what they consider home. I have been very hard on Steve Cherundolo's LAFC because the transformation that has taken place has put them in a spot where I feel like they are much less likely to succeed in knockout tournaments, and that is ultimately what matters at the end of the day in this league. I don't like it, but that's what it is, so that's how we have to talk about it. They're also, have as many wins as losses right now. They blew the lead in the Champions Cup against Inter Miami. And so the way I break it down is this. Steve and I talked about this when they won MLS Cup in 2022. Steve Cherundolo came in and immediately took a team that was not built to win in knockout tournaments, which again is basically all that matters in this league, because they were too possession oriented. They had no other way to win, and made them a multi-dimensional team that still had some of those elements and also was good on the counter and could play just about anyway. And then, as things have gone since 2022, it has gone in the complete opposite direction to where they are way too one-dimensional on the other side of things. All they do is counterattack. I've talked about it before. You go look at the numbers. They basically do not win games in which they do not score first. That is an element or a recipe for disaster in knockout tournaments, because teams are going to score goals on you. It's going to happen. They can't change the trajectory of games. They have a really hard time doing that. And it's just gotten more and more into that being the philosophy of this team. And it has led to what I will continue to argue is significant underachievement based on where the Western Conference is and the money that's being spent on this team. And at the same time, you have to give Steve Cherundolo credit, because if he didn't make those changes, I firmly believe they don't win MLS Cup. The best moment in club history has a lot to do with him, and you can never take that away from him. And I have never tried to pretend anything else has been the reality of the situation. But instead of doubling down on that, it has gone in a direction that I philosophically disagree with for the purposes of trying to win in this league. I say all that to say, things have generally been on a downward trajectory since that MLS Cup triumph. There were some other high points. They've made some finals, but the Crew have dispatched them pretty easily twice. Last season, they didn't even factor into the final stage of the Western Conference playoffs, much less MLS Cup. They had to go watch the Galaxy win. They have fallen from the top tier of this league. That is the simplest way to put it. It is Inter Miami, it is the Columbus Crew, and it is probably FC Cincinnati. And that is tier 1. And so, this is an opportunity, with Cherundolo voluntarily stepping down, to keep all of the positives, the happy memories, the contributions he has made, to celebrate the important role he's played in this club's history, give him the thanks and the gratitude he deserves. He gets to go where he ultimately wants to be, which is Germany. And we'll see what happens next in his coaching journey. And LAFC now have an opportunity to regroup, reboot, and reevaluate the way they play. And philosophically what they're trying to do. And all of this gets to happen before we have anything awkward, before we have any difficult conversations about should somebody be fired, or any of the mess that usually comes because it's so hard to know when to part ways, right? And especially, it's easy if a team's not having success and if a coach is not doing a good job. You can't say that about Steve Cherundolo. My criticisms are very specific, and it's in terms of trying to be the best team in this league and to win trophies. They've obviously been very successful. It's not like he has led this team into mediocrity or something like that. So it's one of those difficult things where, how long, if this were to continue, how long do you let it go? Is it good enough? And all of those difficult, awkward conversations that ultimately, I just think this is best for everybody. That the timing is perfect. He could use a new challenge. He wants to be back in Germany. And LAFC are continuing to go in a downward trajectory. I don't see this improving until fresh ideas are brought in. They're not far away at all. You know they're going to spend the money. It's an appealing job. There's a lot to like about it. I just don't think they're going to get back to where they want to be doing what they're doing right now. it's also not like you can just fire Steve Cerundolo and say it was all him. So this gives an opportunity that ultimately I feel like we're going to look back on this, if LAFC get this right moving forward, and say this was truly one of those situations. Not only was it a mutual parting, and it probably wasn't even that because LAFC wanted them to stay, I would have to guess. But it's something that actually was in everybody's best interest. That the timing of this was just right. It may not necessarily look like that. And it was kind of shocking to see this sort of just come out of nowhere. But this is a great fork in the road for these two partners that have had so much success together to go their separate ways. Everybody's going to get what they want out of this. I really do believe that. Time will tell if I'm right. But it's not every day you have a coach stepping aside, one of the premier organizations in this league, without a clear next step planned, when he was not forced out. You don't see situations like this very often, and I think it is going to work out really well for everybody in the end. We'll see how the rest of the season plays out. Wish Steve Cerundolo all the best in his future, whatever comes next, and it'll be very interesting to see what LAFC do as they begin their search for a new manager at some point here to have that lined up when Cerundolo leaves at the end of the season. That is all for this edition of the Weekend Roundup. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, be sure to hit that subscribe button. I'll see you next time.